2 weeks prior to this incident, we had just come out of prison from Victor Verster and Paulsmoor, because, as you can imagine, there was a complete clampdown towards the middle and the late 1989s. And I think there's just three things. Firstly, thanks, JP, for asking me to come and speak. Obviously, quite an emotional movie, as you can imagine. And I thought I'd speak about three things, really. Five. Three that I want to talk to you about, two that I'll mention, but I'm not going to talk about. The three things is the issue about memory and remembering. The second thing is about youth at that time, as JP indicated. And the third thing is really about media activism and what is it that we expect from young black media activists. So the remembering part is really about, I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago, well, a few days ago actually, when Alan Busak was speaking at in Rocklands in Mitchell's Plain about the United Democratic Front, and the fact that the Western Cape government has now made that particular site a heritage site, a provincial heritage site. Obviously they're going to argue that we make it a national site, but at that event he spoke about unremembering, and he was warning us that if we don't capture our stories and our narratives, if we don't capture our memories, as is the case with this movie, then we are not going to actually understand our history and where we come from. Mainstream media is not going to do it on our behalf. We have to tell our own stories. And so the director of this movie, for those of you that was here yesterday, I'm not sure if you listened to the comrade that was from the MDDA, Martina. So Martina was a producer on this movie, one of the producers. Eugene Paramour is the director. Eugene has the same history as all of us. I mean, it's the same with me. We were all at the same time. He's just from here in Bala. He too is trying to, when I spoke to him about it, he says the only point he wants to bring across is really about remembering. It's about memory and how we use media to actually secure that memory in our minds. Because otherwise our children is not going to know about what happened in those last days of apartheid. You know, the last kicks of a dying horse can be the most vicious. And in the case of apartheid, that was the case. I mean, we got arrested in early '89. We weren't even sure what was going on outside. We heard rumors. So we come out 2 weeks later, this happens. And what happened there was Anton and Gori is the one that's talking so passionately about revenge and betrayal, and I'll come to that. They had discovered where Anton was. Anton was in a safe house in Crawford, in Athlone. They had come into the country whilst we were in prison. And obviously Zaire, Gori, and Anton were in one unit. They were in Quattro, in the camps in Angola. And as Gori explained, he was told to go to Moscow. Anton and Zaire, which was Mark at the time, was sent to the frontline states, and so on. And frontline really means that you're engaging with conflict with the SADF every now and again, because there were a lot of cross-border fighting and so forth. And so when they came back into the country, they were obviously given strict instructions about safe houses and so on. So the first point is about memory and the fact that we must remember that. The second point about youth at the time is, I don't want to talk about things like lost generation. As you could see, the average age of activists, student and youth activists, were 15 years old. And I think that, like the director Eugene Paramour, myself, and many others, we were 16, 17, and we are on the run because we are wanted by the security branch. And I think people need to, for the young filmmakers and for the young media activists here, you need to understand and get into the mind of the person at that time. Being on the run is a very torturous thing. You don't sleep. Every car you hear, every sound you hear, you are alert because you are trying to stay out of prison. You are trying to avoid being killed because there's work to be done outside. There's no point in all of us being in prison. But I can tell you now, and this is one of the controversial points I'll come to, I can tell you now that it's very difficult to continue being on the run. For the reason, psychologically it's difficult because you can only survive it for so many months and then you start losing your mind. So you have two choices. You don't have a choice of leaving the struggle. That bus has passed. They are looking for you. Even if you say, I'm no longer a comrade, they are going to come for you. You can either leave the country or you give yourself up. And a lot of comrades used to do that. They just mentally can't deal with it anymore. So they just walk into the police station and say, phone Captain van Brachel, phone Liebenberg, because we knew who our case officers were. We also had some intel. My case officer was Box, colored guy, who's now dying of, anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point is, we knew our case officers, so you just have to make one phone call, and the police understood that. One phone call and they are there. They come and fetch you. You're either under Section 3.1 or Section 3.6, it depends. But the starting point is 2 weeks solitary confinement, away from anyone. The law is such that they don't have to tell your parents, they don't have to tell lawyers where you are. They just have to interrogate you and torture you and basically moor you. Like the guy was saying the slums, you go through all kinds of torture. So there's being on the run, which mess with your mind. Then in a way, when we got arrested, it was a relief. I have to be honest. Because, there was 12 of us in Mitchell's Plain, and they brought us all to the police station, and it was a relief. It was a relief because you just wanted to stop. But then you go into the next phase, which is your interrogation, the torture, the abuse, etc. Because what they want is information. They want to know where are the others, who left the country, who's in the country, etc., etc. I do want to say at this point, guys, that I disagree slightly with Slums and with Gori to the extent that when you are in that process of being tortured and so forth, you cannot actually, you try and not say anything. You try and send them in a different direction. You try and lie. You do as best you can, but it's not an issue where you are so resolute that you will never say anything that will compromise others. And I think it's important to know that. You can, of course, go the full hog, you take the abuse and so forth, but there are times, I think, that people break, that people actually start saying things, and that's why you get released. The first thing that comrades do is to say, tell us everything. Don't feel ashamed. Tell us what you said. Did you give away certain names? Did you mention certain safe houses, etc., so that we can correct those things? Because that is part of the struggle. That is part of being in a war. And then, of course, there's the post-prison scenario where, by the time Anton is engaged in this 8-hour battle, some of us are getting therapy in Cape Town, closing eyes and flying off the mountain and all that kind of cuck. So, it probably helped. I don't know. So that's the first thing about memory and about youth activists at that time. Eugene is one of them. Being on the run, the police is hunting for him. So for him to actually, in later years, capture this moment, I can only imagine that it was also quite personal and it was quite torturous in a way. What I do want to say about the movie is that it is definitely a restorative project. I think Eugene was doing it to try and have a restorative exercise where if we want restorative justice, we must forgive. We don't have to forget, but we must forgive, because there was all kinds of things happening. And that brings me to the 2 points that I said I will mention but not discuss. And that is Zaire. Yazir Henry was a comrade. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left the country, gone through all the processes of being trained and so forth. There are competing narratives when it comes to Yazir. Competing in the sense that the narrative which Gori wants to obviously believe, and that is that Yazir deliberately, consciously betrayed Anton. So he gets arrested, so that you know. He gets arrested, he's in interrogation, etc. And part of the problem is that people feel that he cracked too quickly. It was just too quick. So he takes the police to where Anton is. What people don't know is that he told Anton. He came, he disappeared. Okay, let me go back. He disappears. He goes AWOL, Yazir. So people are saying, what the hell? Every little thing like this matters because you've got armed caches, you've got weapons, explosives, etc. One of the people in the unit can't just go AWOL. Where is he? What is he doing? If you don't know, you need to move, because that's the protocols. So he disappears, and then he reappears. And so that period of a few days is what a lot of comrades are concerned about. Like, where was he? What was he doing? And so on. Was that the time when he was turned? We don't know. But he comes to the house and he says to Anton, I don't feel safe. I think we are compromised. We need to leave. So Anton says, look, I don't mind what others are saying about you. You are my comrade. You are my brother. I trust you. Just come back. So Yazir is like in a dwal. He's basically he says, let me think about it. So then he leaves the house, and that's when he gets caught. And at that same time when he gets caught, he brings the police to the house. Now, the way in which Anton fought on that day, 7.5, 8 hours before they decided to kill him. They obviously wanted him alive, because the more people you can arrest and interrogate and torture, etc., the more information you'll get about others. So they start engaging, they fighting, etc. The way in which Anton fought on that day does presuppose that he was ready for them. You see, if you have your arms cache, let's say in the bedroom, and here are these people now attacking, you can't be running to the bedroom every time to go and get bullets and grenades and things. It's the way he was engaging. You see, the way he was fighting was that they actually thought there were more than 4 people in the house. They didn't want to believe it was only Anton. And that's why I think Eugene was trying to demonstrate shooting from different directions in the windows. Then he runs to the back. Then he throws 2 grenades. Then he comes to the front. Then he was like a mad person. He was like a mad guy. To a point where they started saying, no, but it can't be one person. So the point I want to make is that I think, and Paramur shares this view, that Anton was ready for them. He had AK at this window with 3 magazines. He had 3 grenades here. He had a rocket propel there, etc. So that he only had to run to various points in the house and take and shoot and put it down, go, etc. It's a debatable point. We will never know because Anton was alone in the house. But what we can say is that he fought valiantly. He fought like a true MKK'er, and he gave them hell. And there's a point where we also think that when you are in MK and you get caught, 99.9% of the time they're going to kill you. That's always the case. They are going to kill you. After they've gotten whatever they want from you, the information, they're going to kill you. And there's an argument that says Anton wanted to just get through the evening till daybreak, and then he was going to give himself up. Because by now, you can imagine, the media is there. This thing is alive. The media is there. So if he gives himself up alive, then the chances of them then killing him would be much less, because the media would say he was arrested alive, he left for Caledon police station, blah, 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 etc., etc. So we think that was the idea. But at some point they took the decision and said, no, this guy is mad. He is not prepared to, you hear what they say, he was laughing like a crazy guy. And that's when they took the decision, no, we need to kill him. And what they did was they drove a Casper in through the wall into the living room, then they threw a grenade, and that's what actually blew Anton up. He's part of a detachment called the Ashley Creel detachment, because as you saw 2 years earlier, Ashley was killed. Also soon after his return. And so the detachment was known as the Ashley Creel detachment. Now, for your purposes, for those of you who are interested, there is a memory project called Kara, because another 2 cadres were also killed whilst they were trying to plant some explosives at the Athlone police station, or that's the official version, that the equipment that they were using was tampered with and they blew themselves up, Robbie and Colleen, but that's actually bullshit. They were killed even before they were there, when they were supposedly, they blew themselves up. There's an inquiry around that and so on. So the Kara Memory Project is about those cadres that were in that unit. So the one controversy is Yazir. What version is correct? Did he do that? You saw him at the TRC, broke down. One stage he collapsed. He's still around. I think he's in the US now. And then the other point, which is also preoccupying comrades like us, is whilst Anton was fighting, what did we do? Where were we? Because there were other MK comrades here. They could see this thing is happening. Why did they not come to the aid of Anton? It's a very sore point. If you talk to people like Gore and others, they lose their shit. But there was a question there. Perhaps if there was another attack from a different direction on the police and the army, it could have given Anton a gap. In the confusion, he could have maybe, etc. But the decision was taken no. And so the question is why? Why that decision? So I think, like many political activists and media activists, I think we should see the movie in the context of a restorative project, like Petals of Blood, the book Petals of Blood. And I think that we need to remember it in that context. The other thing is that the most important point I want to leave you with, colleagues, is that if we don't tell our own stories, if we don't tell our own narratives, no one else is going to tell it for us. So I want to encourage people to continue with this kinds of projects. It opens up wounds. We try and bury it, we try and forget and move on. Like the woman in the movie said, people are, these events and these things have affected us in different ways. And so even though it is difficult to sometimes engage with this kind of material, it is important that people actually do it. And it's not about us wanting to have some place in history. It's really just to show 2 things. That one, like the Soweto uprisings, like the Goniwe 4, the Cradock 4, etc., like many other places in the country, the Western Cape and the Cape Flats was also burning, was also very much active within the anti-apartheid struggle. Because nowadays there's a narrative that suggests that, things were hunky-dory and things were okay here. We weren't really that much involved in the struggle and so on. And I think that is something that needs to be dispelled. It's not true. A lot of comrades have not only sacrificed, not only went to prison, etc., but as you see, a lot of them have also died in the course of the struggle. I brought two young filmmakers with me who actually works with the director of this particular movie from Kini Kadre. It's a very catchy company name. So Sipokaze and Kanti is here. And I thought I'd bring them with so that they can at least meet with people, at least interact, and also just to show that it's not easy to make this kind of film. You know, it's a short film, but it costs money. And so it's a difficult industry to be in. And so I think that for those of you who want to get into this environment, get into media, we need you. We need you to tell the story so that we can keep our memories alive. Thank you. I don't know if we do.
On the formation of gangs within the Cape Flats?
No, I don't. The short answer is I don't think that. What I can say is that on the Cape Flats, and you all have experienced this, guys. On the Cape Flats, you basically you had three options to choose from. Not that you had to choose, but you had basically three things that you could do as a high school student growing up in the Cape Flats. Either you accepted Jesus in your life and you are just a Christian, go to church and forget about things, and you pray for this apartheid government to come to an end and the Lord will provide. Or you decide you are going to join the struggle, become a comrade, and actually do something physically to overthrow this government. Or three, you just remain ignorant. You just pretend that you live your life and you try and make your own, for your own survival and your means, and those were your options. It was politics, religion, or an ignoramus. You didn't have much other options, actually. And so the ignoramus in my argument was gangs. They opted to join the criminal world because it was easy. It's so in your face. So in many ways there were mutual respect between the gangs and the comrades, because even the gangs understood that that's not my gripe, that's not my beef. I'm doing my own thing here in terms of drugs and so on. But I must also say in the 80s we did find each other and sometimes collaborated. Because, you know, in war you use every means at your disposal. So there was times where we wanted to hurt companies in order to make a point to the government. And so bread trucks, meat trucks, all the delivery trucks that comes in to our areas, we used to target them. Tell the driver to get out. First, you can get petrol from the truck, so you can make more Molotovs and petrol bombs. And then you also obviously burn the truck, because you want to destroy the property in order to make a point that business in South Africa needs to also put pressure on the government to change their policies. But there are things in the truck. You don't want to just like burn all the meat or burn all the bread when our people are poor. So that's where the gangs then come in. So we stop the truck as the comrades, tell the driver to get lost. We take the petrol, they take the goods. Sometimes they distribute it, sometimes they sell it. We didn't really care what they did with it, but we mutually benefited in that scenario. So there were some times where there was cooperation. Of course, there were also times when we were enemies, because as community activists, we were also anti-gangsterism and the fact that drugs and things are in our communities and so on. In a way, we wanted more youngsters to join us rather and fight a good fight instead of getting involved in crime and in gangs. But it's a very difficult thing, as you know. Gangsterism and crime is a very pervasive thing, particularly here on the Cape Flats in the Western Cape. Hence the army and so on is now in Menenberg and the likes. But very good comrades that was also produced from Menenberg. No? Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Van Heerden, for enlightening us. I would like to know, since Cape Town, the Western Cape also played a pivotal role in the struggle, and when we look at the current issues that we are currently facing, the challenges within the Western Cape, especially of whereby, as the latter speaker mentioned, the gangsterism, and our own people actually, this divide, our own people killing each other, on a daily basis, crime. I want to ask you perhaps if it's possible that that this history, of solidarity in the past can perhaps be used, within the contemporary to kind of, educate our people, that the struggle, was against an enemy, but now it's different, and we are now killing our own people, like we're killing each other now. So if we kind of maybe can use that history to kind of educate our people that, that we are actually really like deviating from this whole thing, this whole mission, the whole objective.
Look, thanks for that question. It's something that is preoccupying a lot of people, not only in the Western Cape, but in the country. But let's talk about the Western Cape. I think part of what you are seeking, that's part of what you are yearning for, is precisely memory. It's precisely memory. I think it's because a lot of the generation over the last 25 years, young people that are sitting in this room, because they don't have an appreciation and because they don't know about our history, there's a void in terms of belonging, in terms of having a mission in life. Because the mission now, yes, there was an apartheid system, but remember, in order to defend and advance and consolidate our democracy, our hard-earned democracy, we need activism. You can't just think that the leaders of the day is going to look after your interest. Look now with state capture, with corruption and so on. You have to defend and protect your own rights in order to make sure that things go in the way you think it should go. Yeah? So I think that there's a void somehow, and it's partly because people don't know history. They don't have a sense of a mission. How do you overcome that? It's not only memory, of course. It's not only about history, but it is also about wanting to create a better life for the next generation. At the moment, all we are worried about is getting our degree, getting a good job, and cash accumulation. Big car, big house, fancy shoes, fancy clothes, and then you've arrived. That is, I mean, it's as simple as that. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, don't get me wrong. I'm not one of these communist types that say you must not have all those things. You can have them. But what is your actual purpose in life? Is it just to provide for your children? And this is the difficulty that we are experiencing now as parents. You know, what do I tell my kids? How do I bring them up to have some kind of political consciousness? Now, others might say, you know, politics is not for me. I'm not really into politics. And I won't tell you what Bertolt Brecht thinks about people who claim not to say they are not in politics. He has a very nice quote. I'm sure some of you have heard it. Bertolt Brecht is a German philosopher who also used the arts, playwright, theater, etc., to bring his political points across many, many years ago. But he has a very famous, beautiful quote where he says, you know, the worst illiterate that you can have in the world is a political illiterate. It's someone who boasts that, you know, politics is not for me. But actually, if you just take a moment to think, what does politics actually involve? It's about the price of bread. It's about the price of flour. It's about the price of food. It's about prostitution. It's about crime. It's about everything that affects your daily life. So when you say politics is not for me, you are actually just being an ignorant person. You are just an illiterate. Because politics is all around you. How you fight to get NSFAS money to study at this university, it's all politics. So politics is you. And I think, if I have to be so bold, I think that the people in the Cape Flats and the people in the Western Cape have forgotten that. That is the thing, that is the fiber that is missing, and why they don't seem to want to be involved in politics. Or so they claim. Because everyone on the Cape Flats will tell you at the braai, at the parties, at the places, they'll say, no, I don't want to talk about politics. But they vote DA. That one is very clear. Otherwise the DA won't stay in power every time. So it's not true. It's convenient to say, no, you know, politics, don't tell me about the ANC. Everyone is political. And so to answer you, I think that politicization and that consciousness about what is it that we actually want needs to be revived. And you only do that through community engagements, through engaging with people, which is also something that is lacking. Our churches, our community organizations, etc., have all lost their way. I remember a time when the churches were the voices of politics, saying to the congregation that we are in a situation where we can no longer accept the apartheid system and that we need to be active in unions at our workplace, we need to actually be active in our communities, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if there's no easy answer, but to bring activism back, you know, one thing, let me say, the one thing we learned in the 80s, when our parents used to say, or other students used to tell us, no, we don't want to go and burn and fight with the police. We say, okay, it's fine. When it directly affects you. So what we used to do is we make a fire in front of the school. Then we know when there's smoke, the police come. Then we throw some 2-3 petrol bombs. It was like a recipe. Then they respond. They bring in the police. Now they donor everyone in the school because they don't know who's the 6 or 7 of us who started it. So they donor the whole school. Tear gas and dogs and everything. Tomorrow, the whole school is like, come, let's go. These fucking bastards, we must go and fight. Then we say, yes, that's the way to do it. It's the same with our parents. They used to tell us, no, why are you doing these things? Then when the trains are disrupted, they can't get to work, the bosses are giving them trouble, then they start saying, no, you know, this is unfair. Let's march, let's do something. When it affects you directly, you get involved. I don't know if that helps you. So yeah, sure.
I don't have a question, it's more like a comment. I think the bigger question for us as youth, like everyone sitting this side, is how do you tell a story, an activism story, a story that needs to like spark change in your community in the age and the days that we're in today. Like everyone is well aware of what's happening in the political system, if we're being honest. Everyone here knows what's going on with Ramaphosa and all those things. But the thing is then, how do we tell stories and get them out there to people, for people to understand in the media industry, using immaterials like that we use to create deafening echoes? How do we create experimental films that kind of explain what we want to say without conforming at the same time with like the general way that films are made out there? The bigger question is, how do I, as a content creator, create a film with a low budget that can be watched by people from all over South Africa, not even beginning to talk about the world? So I feel like that's the conversation that we need to have amongst ourselves. And how do we get the budget to make those films? Because that's a big question. Like, we're working on a film that has been in process for how long?
Since 2005.
Like for years, we've been working on one film, and the hope that the big thing, like the thing that's holding it back, it's not holding it back, but like the big factors are finance and also telling a story in a way that everyone is gonna understand. Because we do not speak the same languages as, I'm so sorry.
What is that film called?
Love and Fire.
Love and Fire. It's a feature film of this, by the way. It's a longer one, but a different angle and so on.
Yes. So it's Love and Fire. So if you watch it, definitely, because it's not a typical film that you would see playing go Mnet. It's not a typical film you would see playing Gumzansi Magic and all of those things. But it is a film that's going to keep you thinking. It's a film that's going to make you think about, oh my God, there are actually activists at Bondeville that some people actually didn't know about. So the conversation is much more deeper. With us, with the technology Tina Isinayo and with access Tina Isinayo, the conversation is very different than saying, are people interested in politics? It's more of how are we telling stories to then reach other people? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And that, to be honest, that is what SASPO was all about. South African Student Press Union was about alternative media. Because mainstream media, even today, we can see it, are not always the mouthpieces that bring across the stories that we want to know. It's about selling the paper, it's about selling the ads, etc. It's sensationalist and so forth. So it's a very difficult, it's a very relevant question, but it's a very difficult thing to how do we create, and I think that's what JP is trying to do. How do we create an environment where we can have viable alternatives in terms of media? Because, people say media, they make they stereotype and lump everyone together. Yeah, the media is this, the media is that. But actually, they're not talking about community media. They're not talking about bush radio. They're not talking about student media, etc. Because media is very broad. And so I think I'll leave the creative part. I'm not able to answer you. The creative part is up to you guys. What I can say is that we need to find ways of using different mediums to bring the story across. Maybe we mustn't always just think cinema. It could be the fact that, everyone has got a cell phone nowadays in their hands. We need to find different creative ways of bringing that media messaging across in order to preserve memory. Yes?
I've got 2 comments and a question.
Sure.
My first comment is that I really agree with you that a lot of people thought the Western Cape was chill during the struggle and stuff like that, because I'm a history student. During high school, we covered a lot of history, but it was mostly history about black people fighting and resisting the apartheid regime. And I think I only learned about colored people playing the part of the resistance in grade 10. And then I was shocked, like all this time, we were thinking that it was all hunky-dory, like you said. And the only reason we were exposed to that was because my history teacher is an alumni of UWC, and he was also part of the struggle. And I really agree with you that there should be more coverage of the colored people who actually fought against the regime. Another thing is, I recently found out last year about the uprising that even colored students participated in and played a huge factor in mobilizing the masses. My second comment is about Antoine France's death. I feel like Antoine, like you said, he was ready for them. And he decided that rather than either die at the hands of the police or die a traitor, he would rather die a valiant hero. Now, the question I wanted to ask you was that from the TRC and all the stuff like that, do you feel like that the TRC, what they did was inadequate, or are they just putting on this facade of being okay when in actual fact we're living with broken people who don't know how to go on every day?
Okay. Yeah, so look, I mean, you're asking my personal opinion about the TRC. The TRC was set up to do two things. It was supposed to get the truth, then reconcile because of that truth, and then there was supposed to be justice. The justice part is what the TRC never did, if we have to be honest. It was about getting truth, and the truth was supposed to be sufficient to calm ourselves, because now at least you know what happened to your comrades, what happened to your son, your daughter, your mother, your father, and so on. And then we had this thing of reconciliation. Didn't help, I think, that we had clergymen that were in charge of the TRC, because they took a very sort of church-like stance. Let's hold hands, let's pray, let's forgive. But there were cases where people were not given amnesty, even though they had given the truth or half-truths or lies, because the evidence suggested that that's not what actually happened. Those people were not prosecuted. I mean, if we have to now really be crude, the only person that went to prison out of all of this mess was the cook. And funny enough, when you talk to some comrades, they'll tell you, actually that guy is a hero, man, because he stood up for what he believed in. He paid his penance by going to prison, where all these other traitors and banggatte, who didn't actually face the music. But that's another story. So you're right. I think that the TRC could have done much more. I think our people, when you engage with them, generally those who went to the hearings, those who tried to find solace at the TRC, will probably tell you that they are disappointed with that process. Tutu will obviously disagree. He would feel that it was necessary to forgive and so on. But yeah, I'm sure there are those who disagree with me on that.
Okay. How do you personally feel about the way the whole resistance thing and dropping the resistance was handled, and how we moved forward as a country?
Yeah, I can see you guys have had conversations. Look, there are a lot of comrades in the country, and it's something we never talk about. There are a lot of comrades in the country that feel that the option the ANC went with, the ANC and the UDF, which is to negotiate, was a sellout position. There are a lot of comrades that feel that they were ready for combat, they were ready to fight, and they were ready to die. What would have been the outcome? Your guess is as good as mine. We just don't know. The apartheid regime gave up power because the world was changing. The Berlin Wall came down. Those capitalist strong governments that used to support the apartheid government withdrew their support, America, the United Kingdom, and so on, and basically said, we are entering a new epoch, and we are not going to support pariah states like yourselves, so you better start talking to the ANC and resolve this issue. And so There were those that bought into that project and said, no, let's negotiate, let's see if we can optimize our return. And like all these historical moments, there will always be pro and con arguments against and for them. Was it the best option? Could we have survived a full-on war with by far the strongest military presence on the continent, which was the South African Defence Force? They certainly had enough money and they ran up enough of a debt to be able to have sustained a full-blown war with us for a number of years still. And maybe now, by this time, we would still be oppressed because we would not have been able to overthrow them militarily. You know, so we can play these scenarios. I don't know what would have happened if we didn't go to this option. Could we have done this better in terms of negotiations? Of course. It's a give and take process. On some parts we outsmarted them, on other parts they outsmarted us. And we still are dealing with the consequences of those kind of choices. All I can say is that the material conditions on the ground at that time, 89, 90, was such that we in the ANC didn't necessarily feel that we would be able to militarily overthrow the apartheid government. And so this was the obvious option to take. And you must remember, this happens in the middle of November. No? Just 3 weeks after that, sorry, they released the first prisoners from Robben Island. You come out of prison, others are dying, and 3 weeks later, Katrada and a few others are walking free from Robben Island. You're like, what the fuck is going on here? I mean, like, it's just so confusing. It really messes with people's minds and heads and so on. And I think for a lot of comrades, things were just moving too fast. You know, Katrada then comes out in November. By February, the clerk unbans everything. It's like the struggle is over. You know, what the hell? Yeah, so the TRC, it will be debated for years and years to come as to whether it had an impact or not. Shall we call it a day? Oh, there's one there at the back. Okay. It clearly seems you must have more of these sessions, JP, really. Because now I'm the mouthpiece for the whole struggle.
Hello. My question is sort of related to the question I think Clanty asked with regards to telling our own stories. But mine is more not focused on the creative ways. I think as this generation, we have access to the technology, we have access to so many things where we can find means of, you know, documenting our own stories and not having to wait for big media or specifically white, all these big white companies to tell our stories and not actually tell them in the right way and take the certain parts that they want. I think my question is more focused on how do we find access to the content, because we don't, as the youth, we don't have details. We don't know what happened during the struggle, and it's becoming even worse because you can also look in terms of the kids in high school. Even when we were in high school, we're busy learning about Hitler. What relevance is Hitler to us? Yes, it's good to know about the international environment, World War II, and everything that was happening. It is affecting us. But why is, you know, our education system so focused on the history and the wars that are happening externally when we have our own? We don't know the battles. For example, I did not know about the involvement also of the colored students until I came to UWC, until I went to the Senate building and I read some of the things that were there, and I read about the history of UWC. So I think as the youth, we really don't know exactly what happened. We don't know where to access exactly the content so that we know what is true and what is not true, and how do we then document this? Because as as we grow, it seems as if we're getting less and less of the knowledge, and it's getting, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid thing, JP, and it's really something that maybe you guys must take up, because we have got organizations, Zanthi and Sipokaza will tell you, there are organizations that have material, that have kept. Benny Gould, one of our activist photographers here in the Western Cape, has got lots and lots of material in terms of photographs of the period and so on. There is the Community Arts Project, which is based at Salt River Community House, CAP, which also has lots of material, video and visual material. But those are small drops in the ocean. The issue here is that it's actually all scattered around, and that's the problem. We don't have a single central suppository of those kinds of material where people can go. I mean, if you want to write stories about what happened in a particular area like Bonteheuwel or Elsies River or Cape Town, Mitchell's Plain, you'll have to go to the Cape Times archives and go and dig it out and so on and so forth. So maybe that's a project for UWC, since you have the archives of very eminent and prominent people already here. That could be a very good project. I mean, I just want to share with you one story, which I shared with the high school in Mitchell's Plain. And when I finished, they said, no, but that you can't be talking about reality. You're obviously talking about a fictional movie, because there was this one time when things were pretty chaotic in early 89, or maybe it was 88. Could have been 88. That's the other thing, by the way, that you must also remember. With trauma comes selective amnesia. We are finding this out. My generation is finding this out more and more when we try and talk about common incidences and we have different versions. No, but it wasn't like this, it was like that. So also the effect of trauma in all these things. So Spine Road High, we agreed is going to have a mass rally. There's 14 high schools in Mitchell's Plain. I think now there's 15, because one of the technical schools in recent years. So what you do is, as the SRC president, which I was at Portland High, you take all your students. We're all going. Of course, there'll be a few that run away on the way there and go home. But out of the whole school, there's probably about 800 out of the 1,000 and so on that will make it to the rally. So we get there, and clearly the Impimpis had already told the police, because the police was there in full force. I mean, they were all there. They surrounded the school, and their strategy was they are not going to allow any school to come onto the Spine Road School, which means then you can't have the rally. So we are all there, lots of students from different schools in Mitchell's Plain. And some of us leaders come together and we say, so how are we going to do this? It was quite clear that the rally is not going to happen. So, because we've now come all this way, we are going to engage with the police and at least have some engagement and fighting with the police and register our frustration. So that was the decision. But as we are discussing, this, we don't notice that they are already making moves, because they are also beginning to say, it looks like these guys are going to cause trouble. So they be beginning to maneuver with their tear gas and their rubber bullets and everything and the dogs. And then out of the blue comes this police helicopter. But it's quite a skilled pilot, I must tell you, because he comes right there where we are meeting and he's like trying to intimidate us with this helicopter. It's quite low. So students start scattering. And the students is obviously your blanket. Because if they identify that 5 or that 6 is the leaders, they'll come for us. So we then immerse into the students, and now we're running in different directions. I mean, this guy decides to come after this group that I'm in. So we're running, and he's flying, he's coming. And then most of the students go straight, and me and maybe 3 others go down one of the streets. So we go to the right, he comes for us, the 3 of us. Now, he's literally flying like 4 meters, 5 meters from the ground. Coming, we are running like nobody's business. So as I'm running, I'm checking to the right, and I see one of the houses' front doors are open. So I jump the fence and I go. When I get there, they slam the door closed. because they don't want problems. So now the other two went straight. I thought I could get a gap here. Now because the door is closed, I turn around and this guy is now just here in front of me. I see the two of them in the helicopter looking at me. So I run towards them and I go underneath the helicopter because I saw the next house, the window is open. And that guy just swings the body of the helicopter. He's quite a skilled guy, just swings it. And as I go through the window, the open window, the mother is screaming to the child, "Lock the door, I don't want these terrorists in the house." And I'm already jumping on the bed thinking, shit, which way am I going? And the lady is screaming, saying, there's someone in the house already. And she's like, hey, get out, get out. So I go out the back window. Now what happens is when you are pinned down, the helicopter starts circling. And when the other police see it standing on one place, if you know what I mean, then they come. Because clearly he's got something. So I knew I had to move. But now, it's people were making fun of me with prison because how stupid can you be not get away from a helicopter? I said, you should try it. So I run down the road, it's coming, and I go into one of the supermarkets there on the corner, in the supermarket. Then the owner could see, because there's shit happening everywhere. So he gives me an overall and he says, no, because there's a Coca-Cola truck that's offloading some cool drink. So as I'm trying to put on the overall with my school clothes, I just hear, come, meneer. But I mean, the police guys that arrested me, they didn't know, because all of them don't know that you are wanted by the special branch. So I'm thinking, shit, this is it. My days of running is over. I'm going. So they phone in, they walkie-talkie in, and they say, no, ons het een van hulle hierso. We've got one of them here. So now they ask on the radio, what's his name? I mean, how stupid. Do you honestly think I'm going to give my name? I said, no, my name's Bradley something. And they says, no, we are not looking for Bradley. And then they let me go. So anyway, I got arrested 2 weeks later, unfortunately. So I tell the story to the kids, and they all just look at me, they say, no, my friend, you are in an imaginary world, man. That's clearly fiction. But yeah, it was a difficult time. The 80s was a difficult time. We lost lots of comrades, lots of friends. It was war. When people say, it's so easy for some people to say, like Winnie Mandela, strike that match, in terms of necklacing. The truth of the matter is, and you heard Gori also on the film, when you are selling out, when you are collaborating, when you are an impimpi, you are endangering our lives. Because the apartheid government were not playing games, guys. They were killing us, where we were being killed. So if we hear that someone is selling out, we also kill. Because you are actually killing us by collaborating with the government. But that's another point that I don't want to get into. I think we close it on that note, on my fictional movie.